Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Johnny Talk Sports. And with these second playoff rankings, it appears that there are more teams that still have a shot at making the college football playoff than I originally thought this past Sunday night. So let's kind of break this down. And of course, we expected Alabama to be number one. Of course. Why would we not? At number two, Clemson. Number three, Michigan. And at number four, the committee put in Washington this week over an Ohio State team. I honestly originally thought that Ohio State was going to be number four based on their tougher schedule than Washington so far. I mean, Washington is undefeated, though. But, however, if we look at Washington's schedule, the toughest team they've played, theoretically, is Utah. Yes, they beat Stanford when they were number 7. But Stanford after that, if you just look at what's been happening to Stanford after that, they've just been really struggling. It's just been a roller coaster. It's been a roller coaster for Stanford. Now let's look at Ohio State's. Ohio State may only have one loss. But if you think about it, that one loss was on the road at Penn State, who is now in the top 10. And look at this. They went on the road and beat Oklahoma by 21 points. And Oklahoma, they may have 2 losses, but they're starting to climb back up into those bowls. On the road against Wisconsin, it took overtime. They got it done. And they just dominated Nebraska, who was number 10, by nearly 60 points. So really, if you want my opinion, I think Ohio State should be number 4 instead of Washington. Sorry, Husky fans. But that's what happens when you're in the Pac-12. At number 6, you have Louisville, whose one loss came to, of course, Clemson. Number 7, Wisconsin, whose 2 losses came to Michigan and Ohio State, both by 7 points apiece. So they're still hanging in there as the best 2-loss team in all of college football. 8, you have Texas A&M, who dropped only 4 positions after losing to a 3-5 Mississippi State team. But as I kind of anticipated, the committee was going to spare Texas A&M because Texas A&M did lose Trevor Knight for that game, for the rest of the game after the first quarter, and they've lost for the rest of the season. So right now, if Texas A&M wants to make it to the playoff, or if they still have any shot, they're going to have to rely on Jake Hubanock. At number 9, we have Auburn. Their 2 losses. A 6-point loss against Clemson and win week 1. As I've been saying all year long, if maybe 1 or 2 things go differently in that game, maybe Auburn wins it. And that 13-point loss against Texas in week 3. But ever since that, Auburn has just been smoking everybody. Like, they've just steamrolled right through college football. I think it took that win against LSU, that close one, and it's just completely just turned their season around. If Auburn can somehow find a way to make it into the college football playoff, and we're talking they beat Alabama on the 26th. If they can beat Alabama, win the SEC championship game against probably, most likely, Florida, maybe Florida, Kentucky, or South Carolina. I think Georgia may not. I think Georgia's going to fall at the end. Because Auburn could easily still win the SEC conference. And they can make it to the college football playoff. If they can somehow do that, I would look at that LSU game in week 4 as the turning point in the season for Auburn. Number 10, Penn State, whose 2 losses came on a 3-point loss against Pittsburgh and that blowout loss against Michigan. Alright, now if you're Penn State, and if you want to go to the playoff, you want to still have a shot, you are rooting for Pittsburgh to beat Clemson. That is what you need. You need Pittsburgh to pull off this massive upset against Clemson. It is possible. North Carolina State almost beat Clemson at home a couple of weeks ago. In fact, they should have beaten Clemson. Number 11, you have Oklahoma. Of course, their 2 losses were against Houston and Ohio State. Both tough games to play. I made it 5 minutes without coughing today. But if Oklahoma can still find a way to make it to the playoff, you got the gauntlet to end the year. You've had the gauntlet to start the year. Now you got the gauntlet to end it. You've got Baylor this week. You're on the road at West Virginia next week. And on December 3rd, you are at home against Oklahoma State. So if they can get past this gauntlet, they can still make the college football playoff. Number 12, you have Colorado. Now, I haven't really seen much out of Colorado this year. Although Colorado's kind of an underrated team. But again, look at the lack of competition that Colorado's played. They've only played one team currently in the top 25, and that was a 45-28 defeat against Michigan in the Big House. However, Colorado was really hanging in there in that game. In fact, if Colorado wins out, they could end up being the team that could spoil Washington's chance at the college football playoff. But I honestly think this is a trap game for Colorado this week. I think Arizona is going to pull off this upset, I think. However, if Colorado can beat Washington and Utah, they would still win the Pac-12 South and play Washington or Washington State. Which most of the people are thinking it's going to be Washington. I mean, sure, Arizona may be 2-17, but they've got nothing to lose. Colorado's got everything to lose right now. Number 13, you have Oklahoma State. This is a controversial one because their two losses. One was a 13-point loss against Baylor. The other one was that huge controversial ending against Central Michigan. However, I think the committee's kind of taking a look into that. I honestly think that has affected it. But truthfully, Oklahoma State should not have been in that situation in the first place because you could have easily just ran all the way to the other end zone and just give them a safety and ended, and you still win by a point. See, Oklahoma State just lost themselves that game. It wasn't officiating at all. I mean, sure, it could have been officiating, but if Oklahoma State would have just executed it correctly, they would have done it. They wouldn't have had to do that. All right, 14 at Virginia Tech. Their two losses on the road at Syracuse and in Tennessee in the Battle of the Bristol. Virginia Tech still has a chance at making the playoff. They could potentially play Clemson in the ACC championship. I think that'd be a great matchup. 15, you have Utah. Their two losses were on the road at Cal and a home loss against Washington. But what you want for Utah, you would want Washington to win out. I think that's what you would want. Because Utah can still make it to a New Year's 6. All right. 16, West Virginia. Their one loss was against Oklahoma State. That 17-point loss in Stillwater. 17, North Carolina. Their two losses was opening weekend against Georgia. And that 34-3 loss against Virginia Tech with the conditions of Hurricane Matthew. 18, Florida State. 19, Nebraska. Okay, I seriously got nothing against Nebraska. I mean, I respect that the way they're playing football down there in Nebraska. I mean, you've got the most loyal fans in college football. And I will say that. I will just say that. I'm just not afraid to go public and say Nebraska has the greatest fans in college football. Maybe not the most polite at times, but they are the most loyal. I mean, Nebraska could be 0-9 right now, and their fans would still be cheering for them every week. That's how loyal they are. Respect. 20, you have USC. 21, Western Michigan, still representing that group of 5, trying to get into that New Year's 6 bid, but just chased them is Boise State. Then 23, Washington State, 24, LSU, and 25, Arkansas. And the teams that dropped this week were Florida from number 11 and Baylor from 17th. So let's go over some scenarios real quick. Alabama. Clemson, Michigan, Washington, and kind of Western Michigan. Those are the only 5 teams undefeated left in college football. Is there a surprise that there's that many teams left that's undefeated? And should all these teams be undefeated? Clemson shouldn't be. So they should have lost to NC State, struggled against Auburn, only a 1-possession victory against Troy. I mean, there was a comment last week that said, why isn't Troy in the top 25? Because Troy is one of those group of 5 teams that only have 1 loss. In fact, let me just give credit where credit is due. Voice of Reason reviews. Because he is upset because no one in the media is talking about Troy, and there are several 1-loss teams remaining among the group of 5, and Troy is one of them. And Troy should definitely be ranked ahead of West Michigan and Boise State, in his opinion. A very close loss, number 2 team in the country. Looks more impressive than wins over BYU or Northwestern, but that's just him. However, BYU was a really talented squad, though, but their talent just wasn't utilized this year. And Northwestern's a kind of a talented team as well, but Northwestern lost Western Michigan, but Northwestern only lost by 4 points against Ohio State. And they were kind of competing with Nebraska a bit, but Nebraska pulled away in the second half. So I get the voice of reason's reason. And last week I understood why the committee left Washington out of the top 4. And he hopes that Washington's getting into the playoffs even undefeated, because it feels like a legit good team like Michigan or Alabama would embarrass them and it wouldn't even be even close. I kind of agree with that because the Pac-12 has just not had a good year. I mean, if it weren't for Washington, we're not even talking about the Pac-12 right now at all. That's just how dead the Pac-12 is this year. Many anticipate that Stanford could make a run for the playoff with Christian McCaffrey. But clearly, after they played Washington, it's just been just a downward spiral. And he sees Washington a bit like Louisville. Went through a stretch of 60-plus point wins in a row. Once supposedly against a very good FSU team. Lately, they've looked awful. Because Washington has had several huge wins as well, he says, but have looked average more recently. Yes, I agree with that. Although Washington is dominating their opponents, let's take a look at it again. They beat Oregon 70-21, but Oregon has just not had a good year. Oregon is 3-6. They beat Cal 66-27. But California is 4-5, and they don't have Jared Goff anymore. They only beat Arizona 35-28, a 2-7 Arizona team, and you're only going to beat them 35-28. But can we also look at Louisville's schedule real quick? They're playing teams like Charlotte and Syracuse. However, this Syracuse one could be the difference. It could make a huge difference, considering that Virginia Tech lost to Syracuse. Lamar Jackson and his squad beat them 62-28. I mean, look at this. I mean, 70 points week 1, 62 week 2, 63 against Florida State when they were number 2. So they just embarrassed the number 2 team in the country. They beat them by 43 points. And Florida State has just lost 2 other close games after that. So those weeks 2 and 3 could be the difference for Louisville between making the playoff and missing the playoff. They only did beat Duke by 10 points, but Duke kind of shot themselves in the foot in that game. Here's another difference maker. versus North Carolina State. At home against North Carolina State. 54-13. Clemson against NC State. It took overtime for Clemson to win. However, what people are kind of trying to punish Louisville for is at Virginia 32-25. But there are reasons why Virginia could compete hard in that game. Because they had nothing to lose. Louisville had everything to lose. Even Lamar Jackson had his Heisman to lose. So Virginia is not really a team to mess around with necessarily. However, if you are Louisville and you want to make the playoff, you are pulling for USC to beat Washington. That is what you need. You are also hoping that Clemson loses to Pittsburgh. You're hoping for Clemson and Washington to both lose at some point. Because no matter what, you're still going to get into the top four because either Michigan or Ohio State is going to lose once. Or once more, depending on how you look at it. So you would need the Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, that round robin to kind of switch it out. Because the winner of Michigan, Ohio State is going to play Wisconsin for the Big Ten Championship. In fact, I'm leaning towards you want Michigan to win this. I would say you would want Michigan to beat Ohio State. You also need USC to beat Washington this week. I think that is the only way that Louisville is getting in. If you're someone like Oklahoma, you need USC to beat Washington. You need Wisconsin to lose the Big Ten Championship. You need Texas to lose either to Ole Miss or LSU. You need Auburn to lose to Alabama or Georgia or whoever. You also need Penn State to lose at some point. Because the only team I could see Penn State losing to right now, maybe Michigan State at the end of the year. Who knows? Or Indiana this weekend. So there's still just so many scenarios. And if you're Oklahoma State and you want to make the playoff, you got to win out, of course. You got to take care of your business. But you also need these other 7-2 teams to lose as well. And you need at least 2 of the 4 unbeatens left to lose as well. And you also need the winner of the Big Ten Championship to not be undefeated. So if you want to make the playoff in your Oklahoma State, you can't have Michigan win the Big Ten. And you can't have Auburn beat Alabama either. Because right now I think the following are still eligible to get into the top 4 still. This is not counting the top 4. Ohio State, Louisville, Wisconsin, Texas A&M, Auburn, Penn State, Oklahoma, Colorado. I'm even giving a small chance for Colorado, just in case in the art of November crazy stuff happens. Oklahoma State. Virginia Tech, I'm giving kind of a small chance for. West Virginia, kind of a small one as well. So those are the teams that still have a shot. Teams that just focus on trying to make a New Year's 6. Arkansas should focus on that. LSU should focus on that. Those two will play each other this weekend, by the way. Washington should focus on it. But they can play a spoiler for Washington, not only to prevent Washington from getting to the playoff, but also the Pac-12 championship game. Because what happens if Washington State wins out? They're playing for the Pac-12 championship and possibly a spot in the Rose Bowl. So if you're these 2 lost teams, you need some help from USC. You need some help from Auburn. You need some help with Pittsburgh. You need help with a bunch of teams within the next couple of weeks. Anyway, that's going to do it. I'll be back for another reaction next week. Like and subscribe to the channel. We have finally reached 500 subscribers. I mean, nobody thought I was going to make it this far. I mean, I'm just so proud of everybody. It's just not about me. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing it for nobody but you. I mean, nobody gave me a shot. No one. I mean, it's just such a surreal moment. I mean, I'll kind of do something next week. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Have a good night, everybody. I will see you next time.